What if America's greatest West Coast city was supposed to exist in a place you've probably never heard of? In 1810, while most Americans saw nothing but wilderness beyond the Mississippi, John Jacob Astor was planning something revolutionary, a metropolis on the Pacific coast that would rival New York itself. This wasn't some frontier fantasy. He'd identified geographical curiosities and strategic advantages that could have made his dream city the most important trading hub in North America. The geography was perfect, the vision was brilliant, and the potential profits were astronomical. So why did Astoria, this crown jewel of the Costa Oeste, never become the empire it was meant to be? The answer involves international intrigue, impossible timing, and curiosities that reveal how even the most perfect plans can crumble when history has other ideas. Picture yourself for a moment in the early 19th century, when curiosities about the New World still hung in the air like unfulfilled promises. John Jacob Astor, a German immigrant who'd become America's richest man, gazed at maps with the eyes of someone who sees opportunities where others see only wild land. He wasn't just interested in trade, he was dreaming of something much bigger, something that'd forever change the economic geography of the continent. His vision went way beyond traditional business. He wanted to create an empire stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific, connecting worlds that seemed impossible to unite. Astor's plan wasn't just bold, it was revolutionary for its time, packed with geographical curiosities that few could fully grasp. He'd studied Russian trade routes in Alaska and realized that America's west coast could become the key to a profitable trilateral trade: American furs to China, Chinese goods to Europe, and European manufactures back to America. While other businessmen thought locally, Astor thought globally, visualizing a commercial network spanning 3 continents. His calculating mind had identified that whoever controlled the fur trade on the West Coast would control one of the world's most lucrative routes. It was a daring bet that required not just capital, but deep understanding of global economic currents. But here's where the story gets really fascinating. Astor didn't want to just establish temporary trading posts. He dreamed of founding a true metropolis, a city that'd rival New York in importance, but located on the continent's far opposite end. Imagine this man's audacity. While most Americans still considered territory beyond the Mississippi an impassable frontier, he was already planning to build a great city on the West Coast. His project for Astoria included grand ports, warehouses that'd stretch for entire blocks, and a population that'd grow organically through international trade. It was a vision combining commercial pragmatism with almost utopian imagination, and this combination would make his story one of the most intriguing curiosities of American westward expansion. Now, here's where Astor's genius really shines through. The man didn't just throw a dart at a map and hope for the best. He spent months studying every geographical curiosity along America's west coast, looking for that perfect spot where nature itself would become his business partner. The mouth of the Columbia River caught his attention like a diamond catches sunlight, and for good reason. This wasn't just any river, it was nature's own highway, cutting through the Cascade Mountains and providing the only major water route from the Pacific deep into the continent's interior. Astor realized that whoever controlled this strategic choke point would control the entire fur trade of the Pacific Northwest. The geography of this location was absolutely mind-blowing, even by today's standards. Picture this: massive forests stretching as far as the eye could see, teeming with beaver, otter, and other fur-bearing animals that European and Chinese markets craved. The Columbia River system drained an area larger than France, creating a natural collection point for furs from hundreds of miles inland. But here's the kicker: the river's mouth offered one of the few safe harbors along a notoriously treacherous coastline. Ships could anchor here, load up with valuable cargo, and sail directly to Canton, China, or around Cape Horn to European markets. It was like finding a natural loading dock in the middle of nowhere, perfectly positioned for global commerce. What made this spot even more intriguing were the curiosities that most people overlooked at the time. The local climate was surprisingly mild for such a northern latitude, thanks to warm Pacific currents, perfect for year-round operations. The surrounding area had everything a growing settlement would need: timber for construction, salmon runs for food, and indigenous peoples who were already experienced traders. Astor had essentially discovered what modern business would call a perfect storm of geographical advantages. While others saw wilderness, he saw the future New York of the West Coast, and the natural features seemed to whisper that his grand vision wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. When Astor's expedition finally reached their promised land in 1811, reality hit them like a cold Pacific wave. The curiosities they'd imagined about frontier life quickly gave way to harsh truths that no amount of planning back in New York could have prepared them for. These weren't seasoned frontiersmen, they were clerks, craftsmen, and traders who'd signed up for what they thought would be a grand commercial adventure. Instead, they found themselves facing dense forests that seemed to swallow sound itself, unpredictable weather that could shift from sunshine to torrential rain in minutes, and the daunting task of building a settlement from absolutely nothing. The geography that looked so promising on paper suddenly felt overwhelmingly hostile to men accustomed to cobblestone streets and established supply chains. The first months were absolutely brutal, filled with the kind of geographical curiosities that make or break expeditions. They had to clear massive Douglas fir trees, some over 200 feet tall and 8 feet in diameter, using nothing but axes and sheer determination. The soil beneath was rich but tangled with roots that had been growing for centuries, making agriculture a nightmare. Food supplies dwindled faster than expected because hunting proved more challenging than anticipated. The dense forest canopy made it difficult to spot game, and the unfamiliar terrain led to more than one hunting party getting lost for days. Meanwhile, the Columbia River's mouth, which had looked so inviting from a distance, revealed itself to be treacherous during certain tides, making supply deliveries a constant gamble with nature. But here's what really tested these men's resolve: the psychological challenges that come with being literally at the edge of the known world. Communication with the outside world took months. Letters to New York might not receive replies for half a year, if at all. The isolation was so complete that every decision felt monumentally important because there was no backup, no cavalry coming over the hill. Yet something fascinating happened during these dark early days. The men began to develop an almost mystical connection to this West Coast wilderness. They started to understand why Astor had chosen this spot, seeing beyond the immediate hardships to the incredible potential that lay dormant in this geographic goldmine. Little did they know that their greatest challenges were still ahead, and that the very isolation they were learning to embrace would soon become both their greatest weakness and their most defining characteristic. Just when Astor's people were starting to find their rhythm in this West Coast wilderness, history decided to throw them the ultimate curveball. The War of 1812 erupted back east, but its shockwaves reached all the way to the Pacific, turning what should have been a commercial venture into a geopolitical chess match. The British, who'd been eyeing this strategic location with their own curiosities about Pacific trade routes, suddenly saw Astoria not just as competition, but as an enemy outpost that needed to be eliminated. Picture the irony: these American settlers, who'd been battling nature itself for months, now had to worry about British warships appearing on the horizon, ready to claim their hard-won settlement for the crown. The geographical curiosities that had made this location so attractive to Astor now worked against his people in ways no one could have predicted. That same isolation that had tested their resolve during the early days now meant they were completely cut off from any possible American military support. The Columbia River, which was supposed to be their highway to prosperity, became a potential invasion route for British naval forces. Meanwhile, the dense forests that had provided timber and shelter could just as easily hide enemy scouts or hostile forces. What's even more fascinating is how the local geography influenced military strategy. The British realized that controlling the Columbia River's mouth would give them leverage over the entire Pacific Northwest, making Astoria a prize worth fighting for regardless of its current size or economic output. But here's where the story takes a twist that'd make any military strategist shake their head in disbelief. Instead of mounting a heroic defense or finding creative ways to use their geographic advantages, Astor's managers made a decision that would haunt the project forever. They sold the entire settlement to the British North West Company before any shots were even fired. Imagine that, all those months of backbreaking labor, all that investment, all those dreams of building the great city of the West Coast, traded away in a boardroom negotiation because the threat of war made everyone lose their nerve. The very curiosities of international politics had transformed what should have been America's gateway to Pacific prosperity into just another footnote in the complex dance of empire building, setting the stage for an abandonment that would echo through generations. After the British takeover, something heartbreaking began to unfold: the slow, inevitable decline of what could have been America's first great West Coast metropolis. The new British managers, while competent traders, lacked Astor's grand vision and treated the settlement as just another trading post rather than the foundation of a future city. The curiosities that had once excited American settlers about building something permanent gradually faded as the focus shifted to short-term profit extraction. Ships arrived less frequently, supplies became irregular, and the sense of building towards something magnificent was replaced by the mundane reality of day-to-day survival. It's fascinating how quickly a dream can wither when the dreamer is no longer steering the ship. The geography that had once seemed like such an advantage began revealing its double-edged nature as the settlement's purpose shifted. Those same dense forests that provided timber also made expansion incredibly labor-intensive without a growing population to sustain the work. The Columbia River's seasonal variations, which hadn't mattered much for a trading post, became problematic for any serious urban development. But here's what's really intriguing about this period: the geographical curiosities of the region started working against long-term settlement in ways that Astor's initial surveys had missed. The wet climate, while mild, created constant maintenance issues for buildings and equipment, and the isolation that had once felt pioneering now just felt lonely. Without regular influxes of new settlers driven by a shared vision, the community began to shrink rather than grow. By the 1840s, what remained of Astoria had become a shadow of its original ambition, a collection of weathered buildings housing a handful of traders who'd lost touch with the grand dreams that had brought them there. The real tragedy wasn't just the physical abandonment, it was the loss of momentum, the way a West Coast vision that could have changed American history simply faded away. Other settlements along the Pacific coast began to thrive as California's gold rush drew thousands westward, but Astoria had already missed its moment. The curiosities of timing and history are often cruel. The same geographic advantages that had made perfect sense in 1810 were being discovered and exploited by others in the 1840s, leaving Astor's dream as a cautionary tale about what happens when vision meets reality without the persistence to see it through. Walk through modern-day Astoria, Oregon today, and you'll encounter one of history's most fascinating curiosities, a city that exists, yet isn't the city it was meant to be. The original settlement that John Jacob Astor envisioned as America's great West Coast metropolis did eventually grow into a real town, but not until decades after his grand vision had been abandoned and forgotten. What's absolutely mind-blowing is how the geography that attracted Astor in the first place still shapes this community today. The Columbia River still brings commerce, the forests still provide resources, and that strategic location still matters for Pacific trade. It's like watching a prophecy fulfill itself in slow motion, generations after the prophet had given up hope. The geographical curiosities of this place continue to fascinate anyone who takes time to really understand what they're looking at. Modern Astoria sits on the exact spot where Astor's people built their original fort, and you can still see the logic of their choice everywhere you look. The river mouth that once promised to be a gateway for fur traders now hosts massive cargo ships carrying goods between Asia and America, essentially the same global trade vision Astor had, just with different products and better technology. The hills that once seemed like obstacles to urban development now provide stunning views that attract tourists from around the world. What failed as a 19th-century commercial empire has succeeded as a 21st-century blend of industry, tourism, and small-town charm. But here's where the story gets really intriguing for anyone interested in the curiosities of historical what-ifs. Every time you drive across the Astoria Bridge or watch a container ship navigate the Columbia River, you're witnessing Astor's vision finally coming to life, just not in the way he imagined. The West Coast did become the commercial powerhouse he predicted, with cities like Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco fulfilling the role he'd envisioned for his Astoria. Sometimes the most profound legacies aren't the ones we can see directly, but the ones that inspire others to dream bigger, to look at a map and imagine possibilities that don't yet exist. Astor's failed city planted seeds that would eventually bloom into the entire Pacific Northwest's emergence as a global economic force, proving that sometimes the greatest geographical curiosities are the ones that take generations to fully reveal themselves. So here's the real question: what geographical curiosities are you overlooking in your own life right now? Astor saw opportunity where others saw wilderness. What patterns and advantages are sitting right in front of you that you're not recognizing? His vision for the West Coast failed not because it was wrong, but because he couldn't adapt when circumstances changed. You have his story as a guide now. Where's your Columbia River? What strategic position are you in that you haven't fully leveraged yet? Don't let this just be another interesting story. Let it change how you see the curiosities and possibilities around you. Subscribe and hit that notification bell if you're ready to start seeing opportunities like the visionaries who shaped our world.